Starting the Gemara on Daf Yudal Damid Beis, 3 lines from the bottom. The Gemara is discussing the Seder of the Aveda in the morning of the Beis HaMikdash, the Ketores, and the cleaning out of the Natis. So, as we say every morning actually, the cleaning out of the Natis was divided into 2. There was 5. First they cleaned out 5 of them, and then the next 2. And they made a break in between. But the question is, with what did they make a break in between? So that's a machlokes here that the Gemara brought. According to the Rabbanon, the break in between was with the Ketores. According to Abishol, the break in between was with spraying the Dam HaTamid on the Mizbeach. So the Gemara here brings the source of this machlokes. My time at Abishol. What's the reason of Abishol that the break in between the Hatava of the Natis is not with the Ketores? The Ketores was done later. Because the pasuk says, "Ba'baiker, be'tiva is every morning when they clean out the Natis, and v'hadar, and only afterwards does it say in the pasuk, yaktirena, that Ketores is brought. So in the simple lashon of the pasuk, the Natis comes first, and the Ketores comes after, not in between. Rabbanon, and according to the Rabbanon, my ka'omer achmana, how do you read this pasuk? What is the Torah saying? Be'idon hatava, at the time when you're doing that tava, cleaning out the neda, is tehei mak the Ketores. You should bring the Ketores. So when it says beheitiva yasanedes, and then it says yaktirena, beheitiva means while you're being mative, in between the 5 and the other 2. Now the Rabbana bring a raya to their interpretation, even though it's not a simple pshat of the pasuk, because it says yaktirena afterwards. If you're not going to say the pshat on the pasuk here this way, so bein arbayim, when it comes to the cleaning out of the natis and the ketores that was brought bein arbayim in the afternoon, the pasuk says uvahalois aranes haneres bein arbayim, when he lights the menorah close to the evening, yaktirena, and then he brings the ketores as well. So what does this mean over here? Does this mean the bereisha madlik natis? That first you light the menorah, v'hoda mak the ketores shel bein arbayim, and only after you light the menorah do you bring the ketores? That can't be. The ketores, that after you light the menorah, there's no other aveda that's done in the Beis HaMikdash, as the Gemara will now explain. If you're going to argue and say, maybe the ketores is done after the lighting of the menorah. But Vatanya, we learned in Abraisa, when the Torah says regarding lighting the menorah, me'erev ad boiker, what is the meaning of me'erev ad boiker? So there's 2 pshatim here. One pshat is, ten la midasa, put enough oil inside of the menorah, shetehei deilekes vahileches kol halayla, that the menorah should burn the entire night. Right? So as Rashi brings, there was a half a lug that they placed in every candle, that it should burn the entire night, even for the long nights of Tevis. And if it's more, if it burns longer, it's okay, but that was the amount that they put in, and actually they would change the thickness of the wick, depending if it's long nights or shorter nights, but you should put in the right amount that it should burn the entire night. That's one pshat. Davar acher, another pshat, me'erev ad boiker. What does it mean that this menorah is burning from erev ad boiker? Ein lecha aveda sheksheira me'erev ad boiker. There's no other aveda that's kosher to be done from erev until the morning. Ela zu bilvad. Only this aveda, only the aveda of lighting the menorah. So as Rashi says, the drasha here is, because it says there in the pasuk, yarech oisai. Oisai aran avadim erev ad boiker. So only oisai, only the menorah, the aveda is done from this point, from erev until boiker, but there's nothing else, no other aveda is done after you lit the menorah. So if so, when it says over here that you light the menorah and then yaktirena, it can't mean that the ketores is done after the menorah. It's me'erev ad boiker, there's no other aveda that's done. So ela mai kamer achmana. So what does the Torah mean when it says the ketores after it talks about lighting the menorah? Be'idon ad loke, at that time when you're coming into the Beis HaMikdash to light the menorah, tehei mak the ketores, you should also do the ketores. But the ketores is done first, and afterwards you light the menorah. So Hachanami, so the Rabbanon say here as well, be'idon hatave, when you light, when you are cleaning out the menorah, tehei mak the ketores, you should do the ketores not afterwards, but in between. First the 5 natis, and then the ketores, and then another 2 natis. Like you see, b'negei to the menorah at night, that it can't be after. Abishol answers to this. Rabbanon have a very strong raya that when it says yaktirena afterwards, it does not mean afterwards. So what does Abishol answer to this? Shani hasam the chsiv oisai. Over there, Taki, you're right. There the pasuk says oisai, that nothing else could come afterwards, and therefore we're forced to tie yaktirena, not like the simple pshat. But in the morning, if we're not forced to change the simple pshat of the pasuk, we tie yaktirana to simply mean afterwards. And therefore you don't make the break between the neiros with the ketairis. Sagt the Gemara weiter, Rav Papa maloi kashya. This Rav Papa now is coming back to the original question that the Gemara had before and Daf Yudal Damid Beis. The Gemara asked a stira of two Mishnayos here in Masechta Yoma. There was the Mishnah that it said in Daf Yudal Damid Aleph, and this Mishnah it said that the Seder of the Avodah was first Ketaires and then Meitav V'Saneres. That's what it says here in Daf Yudal. Then there's a Mishnah later in the second Perek where it talks about the pious, the raffle that they made every morning in the Seder for the Kainim to do their Avodah, and there it actually says that the raffle was first the Neiros, and then afterwards came the Ketairis. The opposite order of what it says in the Mishnah over here. So Rav Papa gives a different answer. Again, the answer of Abaya was that the Mishnah over here is going according to the opinion of the answer of Abaya was that the Mishnah over here is talking about the two Neiros. Two Neiros came after the Ketairis, and the Mishnah later is talking about the 5 Neiros. And the 5 Neiros came before the Ketairis. Rav Papa says a different answer. Rav Papa Amalei Kashya, based on what we're discussing here, the two opinions of Rabbanon and Abishol, it's not a question. Ha Rabbanon and Ha Abishol. The Mishnah that says that the Ketairis came after the Neiros, or let's first talk about our Mishnah. The Mishnah over here that says that the Ketairis comes before the Neiros. This goes according to the opinion of the Rabbanon, because the Rabbanon say the Ketairis, you make a break with the Ketairis in between the Neiros. So our Mishnah, when it says Meitav V'Saneiros, is talking about the two Neiros that come after the Ketairis, like the opinion of the Rabbanon, that you make the break between the Neiros with the Ketairis. The Mishnah later that says that the Neiros come first and then the Ketairis, that's going according to the opinion of Abishol, that the Ketairis was not a break in between the Neiros, the Ketairis came later. So that's the answer to this question. Rabbanon and Abishol. So the Gemara asks on this.
About the two Neiros and one speaking about the 5 Neiros.
No, according to Rav Papa, both Mishnayos are talking about the two Neiros. But according to this Mishnah, it's the Rabbanon, and the Rabbanon say that the two Neiros came after the Ketairis, and the Mishnah later is also talking about the two Neiros. But the Ketairis, according to Abishol, came even after the two Neiros, because the break in between the 5 and the 2 was with the Dam Atomit, not with the Ketairis. So now the Gemara asks a question on this answer. What are you saying? The Mishnah here follows the Rabbanon's opinion. Pious, the Mishnah later in the second Perek, which talks about the Seder and the raffles that they made, Abishol. That's following Abishol's opinion. But how can you say this? The Gemara is going to bring now another Mishnah later on in the third Perek, which goes according to the Rabbanon. Look further in the Masechta, what does it say? This is regarding the Avodah of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur. So there it says, they brought the Kohen Gadol the first thing in the morning, the carbon atomit, and the Kohen is the one, the Kohen Gadol, has to do the entire Avodah himself. Kartzai, he made a quick shchita. Rashi says kartzai means a quick shchita where he shechted most of the 2 pipes, so it should be a kosher shchita, but he didn't complete the shchita because he himself has to grab a bowl to catch the blood, because he has to do the shchita and the kabbalah sadam and everything. So therefore he does a quick shchita and umerek acher shchita al yadoi, and then he has to go and get the blood from this shchita, and nichnas lahakteres akteres, and then he enters into the Beis Hamikdash to go and do the ketores. So here it says the ketores first, and then ulahetev v'saneres, and then he goes and cleans out the neres. Asan l'Rabbanon. So this Mishnah is according to the Rabbanon's opinion that the ketores is before the neres. So what does it mean when it says the ketores is before the neres? It means that the ketores is brought before the 2 of the neres. You already made the 5 neres before. Doesn't mention it befedish in that Mishnah, but 5 Neiros was before. No, I don't think before the Shechita. After the Shechita, 5 Neiros, then the Ketores, and then the other 2 Neiros. Asan la Rabbanon. This is according to the Rabbanon's opinion. According to Abishol, the Ketores comes afterwards. So it would come out as follows. Reisha v'Seife Rabbanon. The Reisha, meaning the Mishnah here in Daf Yudalid, is the Rabbanon, and the Seife, the Mishnah later in the third Perek, which is in Daf Lamed Aleph, that's also according to the Rabbanon. Umitziyase, and then there's a Mishnah in between in the second Perek, which is Abishol, which follows Abishol's opinion. That's a very big deichik to say such a thing. Amalach Rav Papa answers you and says, yes, that's according to my pshat, that's what's going on here. Yes, Reisha v'Sefer Rabbanon, the Mishnah here and the Mishnah later is the Rabbanon, and Mitziyasa Abishal, and the Mishnah in between is going to be Abishal. That's my pshat in these Mishnayos. So the Gemara now says, Bish loima Abaye lo Yoma Rav Papa. We understand why Abaye did not want to give Rav Papa's answer, because it's a daichik. Reisha v'Sefer Rabbanon, the beginning and the end is Rabbanon, Umitziyas Abishal, and the Mishnah in between in the second Pedic is Abishal. But El Rav Papa, so therefore lo moikim lo, he doesn't want to say according to Abaye's pshat. El Rav Papa, but according to Rav Papa, my time lo Yoma Abaye. Why did Rav Papa not want to say like Abaye's pshat, that since we divide the hatava of the neidos into two, there's 5, and then the ketores, and then the other 2 neidos, so you have a very simple answer. Where it says the ketores comes first, it's talking about 2 neidos, and when it says the ketores comes second, is when it's talking about the 5 neidos. Isn't that a very simple answer? Amalach, Rav Papa will tell you, no, it's also a deichik. Tana bereisha hatavas shtei neidos. According to Abaye's pshat, it comes out that the Mishnah here talks first about the 2 neidos, and regarding the 2 neidos, it says that the ketores was first, and v'hadar, and later in the second Pedic, hatavas chamish neidos. There it talks about the 5 neidos, and the ketores comes after it. It's out of order. Why is the Mishnah here first saying the 2, and then later the 5, if the 2 comes really after the 5? That's what was bothering Rav Papa with Abaye's answer. Abaye will tell you that's not a problem. Over here, the Mishnah is not coming to tell you the order. Over here, it's just coming to teach you the halacha that the Kohen Gadol, during the 7 days when he was separated, he should go and do part of the Avodah. So it mentions that he does the Avodah of the Atavas HaNeidos, and it mentions the last 2, which is the completion of what the Neidos are. It's not coming to tell you the order over here. V'sidrahu hadar tanila. But then the Seder, Vesidra, now the order of how it has to be done, Hada Tanila, that's going to say later, the Seder, how it's done, when it talks over there about the raffles that was made, the first raffle, the second raffle, and the third raffle, and the whole Seder of the Aveda. Later, it's focusing on the Seder. But over here, it's Bachlal not focusing on the Seder, so you can't be medayik the fact that it brings the 2 neidos over here first and the 5 neidos later. Okay, so this concludes the 2 pshatim regarding the Seder, the way it's brought over here in Masechta Yoma. Now the Gemara goes back to something that was mentioned at Chagav before, from a Mishnah in Tamid and Rab Shimon Ish HaMitzpeh b'nigeh to how the spraying of the blood of the carbon Tamid was done on the Mizbeach. Gufe, so going back to that Mishnah that was quoted before. So it says as follows, Baloi lekerem mizrachis tzfainis. The Tanna Kama says the way they sprayed the blood was as follows. You brought it first to the corner of the Mizbech, which is Mizrachis Tzfainis. Noisen Mizrachis Tzfainis. You put 1 spraying of the blood on the corner of Mizrachis Tzfainis, and then you come to Maravis Draimis, and you put one matana, you spray the blood in the Mizbech in that corner also once, Noisen Maravis Draimis. And you spray once, and it spreads out to Maravis and Draimis. This is what's called Shtayim Shehein Arba. But V'tani Allah, in Abraisa we learned regarding this, Rab Shimon Ish HaMitzpeh Meshane B'Tamid. Rab Shimon Ish HaMitzpeh said that the spraying of the blood in the Mizbeach was different than a regular carbon oila. By carbon Tamid it was not the same. And what did you do? Balei lekarem Mizrachis Tzfainis, when you came to the corner of Mizrachis Tzfainis, Noisen Mizrachis Tzfainis. Yes, so then Taki, you did it like every carbon oila. One spraying, which is 2, because it spreads out to Mizrachis Tzfainis. But when you come to Maravis Draimes, Noisen Marave, so you have to spray the blood twice. Once on Mairev side, and once on Darim side. So over here, you have to give 2 separate matanes. So the question is, my time that Rab Shimon Ish HaMitzpeh, why is Rab Shimon Ish HaMitzpeh saying that the carbon tamid is different than every carbon oila, which is Shtayim Shein Arba? Here it's Achas Shehu Shtayim, and then Shtayim Shehu Shtayim. Then you do have to do 2 matanes, which are 2. Rabbi Yechanan Mishumcha Debei Rabbi Yanai. Rabbi Yechanan explained in the name of one of the students of the yeshiva of Rabbi Yanai. Makra, the pasuk says, and this is actually a pasuk regarding the carbon on the Shchaydish. V'seirizim echad lechatas laHashem. So on Rosh Chodesh you bring a seirizim as a chatas. Al oilas atamid yeyase v'niskai. On the oilas atamid which is brought with the nesachim. So the simple pshat of the pasuk is, al over here is translated as besides. You bring a carbon chatas besides the tamid. But We darshan al mean on. It goes on the Eilas HaTamid, meaning that you should include the halacha of chatos also in the carbon Eilas HaTamid that's brought. Eilahi, there's a carbon Eilah that's brought, V'amar Achmana, and the Torah, when it says al Eilas HaTamid, is saying Ovid ba Maisa chatos, that you should also do by this Eilas HaTamid a Maisa which is like the chatos. That's what it means when it says al. Add to that, it should also be on by the Eilah like the chatos. So the Torah is saying this regarding the carbon of Rish Chodesh, and from this we understand that the same thing is regarding the Eilas HaTamid that's brought every day, that part of it you have to have a regular carbon Eilah, but part of it has to be also like a chatos. And therefore we say, okay, so what do you do? Noisen achas, once you give the blood on the corner of Mizrachas Sveinis, shtayim, like a regular carbon Eilah that divides into two. Kamaisa Eilah, like every Eilah. Then shtayim, shein shtayim, then when you come to the Maravis Draimis, so you have to place the blood twice. Kamaisa chatos, like a carbon chatos. That's what you see from this pasuk. Part of the carbon has to be like an Eilah, and part of it has to be like a chatos. But now the Gemara is going to go through different options. We do see from this pasuk, according to this drasha, that the tamid has to be partially like an Eilah and partially like a Maisa chatos. But this is not the only way how to do it. The Gemara is going to ask that there would be different ways how to include both a Eilah and a chatos in the tamid. Fragt the Gemara, Veliten shtayim shein arba kamaisa Eilah. Why wouldn't we first give the blood completely like a carbon Eilah on both sides, shtayim shein arba, and then va'arba shein arba kamaisa chatos, and then do the zrika of the blood all over again on all four corners, 4 times, just like it is with a carbon chatos, that you do the zrika separately on all 4 sides. In other words, the Gemara is asking, how do you know you do half like an Eilah and half like a chatos? Seemingly half and half. It's like nishtahar, nishtahin. It's not a Eilah, not a chatos. Maybe the Torah is saying to do 2 zrikis, fully like a Eilah and fully like a chatos. So the Gemara answers, we never find that you use blood and you spray it on the Mizbeach, and then you use the same blood to start over the kapara all over again and spray it again. So therefore we don't say such a thing. Fragt the Gemara, that's your problem that we don't find? But what you're saying, you do also you don't find. Do you ever find blood that's brought for a carbon, that half of the blood is brought as a chatas, and half of it is done like an Eilah? We never find such a thing either. Ella, so what are you going to say? Al karcha kishin akasav. This is what the Torah is saying, that this is an exception, and over here you make half a chatas and half an Eilah. That's what you were suggesting. So hachanami bal karcha nikishin akasav. So I can tell you that the Torah is comparing it in this way. So if maybe the Torah means to say that here it's an exception, and you do the zrika twice, once like an Eilah and once like a chatas. So the Gemara says, no, it's not the same thing. Even though it's not an exception, but it's not the same thing. Why? Hasam, pisuk matanais ba'al mehi. Over here, what we were saying, that you make half like an Eilah and half like a chatos. So the chiddush over here is that you're taking once, that you're supposed to spray the blood once, and it separates twice on the 2 sides of the wall. So over here you're dividing it, and you're saying that instead you do the zrika over here once and over here once. But you're not mamish redoing the entire zrika. That's a much bigger chiddush, to go and say for the same carbon that you once do the whole zrika for an Eilah, and then you start all over again and you do the zrika of a chatos. That's something that's completely, you never find such a thing. But over here, just a pisuk, to divide it into 2 when you're spraying it instead of once, that's not such a big chiddush, and therefore it makes more sense to do it this way. Now the Gemara asks another question, but if you're saying that it has to be half like a Eilah and half like a chatos, so maybe we should go all the way. Half like an Eilah, half like a chatos, and the Gemara explains, V'neisiv, if so, we should place the blood on the Mizbeach, achas sheishtayim, that first time that's going to be like an Eilah, so you spray it once, which divides into 2, lamata, it should be done below the chuta sikra, so we know the Mizbeach had this red line that went in the middle, and all karbanis Eilah, the zrika was done on the bottom of that red line, and all karbanis chatos, the zrika was done above the red line. So if so, over here, if we're dividing this carbon into 2, so the first part, which is like an Eilah, should be done lamata, below the red line, kamaisa Eilah, and then shtayim shein shtayim, the second part of the zrika over here, which is done like a carbon chatos, should be done shtayim shein shtayim, meaning that you should sprinkle the blood twice on top of the chuta sikra. Kemaisa chatos, exactly like it's done with a chatos. So why did Rab Shimon Ish HaMitzpeh not say that you have to go up on top of the mizbech to do it on the top? So on this the Gemara says, again, the svara that it said before.
How in the bottom?
Huh?
And how in the But he meant
Yeah, according to what it said before. So you do everything on the bottom. Elamai, the one that's like a chatos, you divide it like a chatos, but it's still on the bottom of the chota sikra. So the Gemara is asking, why don't you have to go and do it 100% like a chatos on the top? So the Gemara says, Loi matzinu domim. The answer is because we never find blood that's spread in the mizbeach, shechetzion l'mayla v'chetzion l'mata. That half of the blood you sprinkle above the chota sikra and half from the bottom. You never find, wherever the blood is put, it's always blood put on the same location in the mizbeach. Fragt the Gemara, you never find blood that part of it goes on top and part on the bottom. But we learned in the Mishnah regarding the Aveda, this is over here later in Masechta Yoma, regarding the zrika of the dam that's done in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. So over there it says, Hiza mimenu, you spray from the blood, achas l'mayla, and you spray it once goes above, v'sheva lamata, and 7 goes on the bottom. This is by the kapairis. The kapairis was thicker, tefach, so you spray once on the top part of the thickness of the kapairis, and 7 below the thickness of the kapairis. That's what it sounds like it's saying here. So how could you say that you can't divide the zrika of the dam above and below? And for the Gemara, no, over there, it doesn't really mean above and below. It means kematzlif. What does kematzlif mean? The Gemara explains right away. My kematzlif. What does kematzlif mean? Machvir Rav Yehuda showed kemenagdana. Like when you whip a person with malchus, so when you give malchus, you're not really mechaven one above and one below. You give malchus really more or less in the same place. When you go a little drop lower, drop lower, drop lower, you start from the top of the back, from his shoulders, and you go a little bit lower and lower and lower. But it's not really lamaila and lamata. You're not really separating above and below. So therefore from there's no question on what we're saying over here, that you can't have above and below. The Gemara, the emphasis is that the Taisus over here points out that there's a lashon. We say it in the Nusach on Yom Kippur, in the Aveda. So the emphasis, it says it beferish over there in the Mishnah. Taisus even asks, it's a pella b'chlal that the Gemara asks this question. Okay, Taisus explains, but the point is that it's not Maila and Mata over there, so there's no question. The Gemara from another case, do we not find that you have part of the blood on the top and part of the blood on the bottom? There's another Mishnah where it says, also later here, Hiza mimenu, you spray from the blood that you bring inside the Beis HaMikdash and the Mizbeach HaPnimi, al Tarei shel Mizbeach. You spray on the Tarei of the Mizbeach. The Gemara will now explain what Tarei of the Mizbeach means, but it says you spray Sheva Pamim, 7 times. My love, what does the word Tarei mean? Apalge the Mizbeach, that you have to spray it right at the middle of the Mizbeach. Why does the word Tareh mean the middle section of the Mizbeach? Kedamri Inchi, like people say regarding the daytime, Tar Tiara. As soon as the sun comes in the middle of the sky and it's chatzais, people say, it's the clarity of the day. It's like the sun is the brightest in the day. So just like people use that expression of Tar regarding chatzais, so it means also you spray it right in the middle of the day. Who palga the Yoma, so that's, people call that the middle of the day. So the same thing over here, he's spraying the blood in the middle of the Mizbeach. So Rashi says, what's the Gemara's question? If you're spraying the blood right in the middle of the Mizbeach, it's impossible that it shouldn't be part of the blood should go right above the higher part of the Mizbeach, and part of it will go in the lower part of the Mizbeach. It's impossible to aim that it should be exactly in the middle. So we see that you could spray the blood in the Mizbeach HaPnimi, and part will go on top and part will go on the bottom. So if so, over here, if you want to have half like a chatas and half like an oila, you should spray part on the bottom and have part on the top. Rabbi Bar Shila says that's not the pshat of Tareh shel Mizbeach. Loi, that's not what it means. Agufei the Mizbeach, it means on the rooftop of the Mizbeach. And what's the meaning of the word Taharai? Like the pasuk that says, like the essence of the heaven, Latoyar, which is clear. Same thing over here, means the top of the Mizbeach. So there's no raya from there, and therefore that's not a question. We never find that half is on the top and half is on the bottom, so therefore over here we don't do this. Frag the Gemara. So Rab Shimon ben Isha Mitzpah says that the carbon tamid, the blood has to be half like an oila and half like a chatas. But Maishna, why is it that we say the yav oila bereisha, that first you sprinkle the blood like an oila, and v'hada yav the chatas, and then only afterwards you sprinkle the blood like a chatas? Maybe it should be the other way around. Nesev bereisha the chatas. Maybe first you should spray the blood like a chatas, which is 2 times separately, and v'hada nesev the oila, and only afterwards you should spray the blood like an oila that is achas shi shtaim, that you spray once and it divides into 2. And for the Gemara, now kivin the oilahi, since the carbon tamid is an oila, he katma bereisha. So therefore, first you spray the blood like an oila, and only afterwards you add to what the Torah says that it should be like a chatas. Okay, it's interesting that the Gemara asks this question. I mean, it's a davar apashit that we're talking about an oila, that the spraying of the oila should be first. But maybe the pshat is, it's the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya and you get a satshuva that the seder of the karbonis always has to be first chatas and then oila. Chatas is to be mechaper, and then the oila is to be meratza, to appease. After you are already mechaper, you want to be meratza melech, that it should be like lifnei achet, so the oil is like only comes after achatos. Therefore, the Gemara is asking that over here we should first spray the blood like achatos and then like an oila. So it's a big chiddush that over here we do first like an oila and only afterwards like achatos. The Gemara has another few questions over here. Benegeh to the seder of the zrike. What's the difference? The yoev mizrachis tzfainis and omaravis draimis. Why is it that the seder, why is it that the corners that we choose to spray the blood on the mizbeach is dafke the mizrachis tzfainis corner, and then you come around to the other corner and where to the maravis draimis? Why is it these two corners that we choose to spray in the mizbeach? Maybe we should choose another two corners. Neisiv draimis mizrachis. Maybe the blood should be sprayed in the mizbeach on draimis mizrachis, and then v'hadar tzfainis maravis, and then diagonally across on tzfainis maravis. Why punkt after these two corners? Amri, so the answer is because oila to una yisoid. By the zrika of the dama oila, from the tamid, the blood has to go also on the yisoid of the mizbeach. As Rashi brings the pasuk, it says al yisoid mizbach oila. So since there has to be the yisoid, so therefore you have to have the keren draimis mizrachis loyhavele yisoid. The draimis mizrachis part of the mizbeach did not have a yisoid. The yisoid, there was the mizbeach itself, and then at the bottom there was the base of the mizbeach that stuck out another amma. But that part that stuck out another amma did not stick out by the draimis mizrachis. It was only on two sides, mainly on two sides of the mizbeach, as Rashi over here brings from the Mishnah in Midas, that it was on Safin and on Ma'ariv. But by draimis mizrachis, there was no yisoid over there. So therefore you can't spray the blood of the oil over there. Gemara has another question. So, okay, we know why we chose these corners, but why in this order? Ma'ishna, the yav bereisha, mizrachis tzvainis. Why are you going first to mizrachis tzvainis? And v'hada maravis draimis. And then afterwards you go to the maravis draimis. What's the reason to go in this order? Maybe do it in the opposite order. Neisiv bereisha maravis draimis. Maybe the blood should be sprayed first on maravis draimis, and v'hada mizrachis tzvainis. And then afterwards to come to the mizrachis tzvainis. Answers the Gemara, the reason is Kivin the Amamar. Since the Tana said, Kol pinis shatapaina, anytime you turn, when you in the Aved in the Beis Hamikdash, lo yiu el derech yamin, you should go to the right side, and le mizrach, and also to mizrach side. Ashi says that mizrach is not really relevant here, but it's relevant over there, beneged to what the Tana was speaking about, because it's talking about where you place the kevesh of the mizbeach. The kevesh of the mizbeach was on the darim side of the mizbeach. If you go up from the kevesh on the darim side of the mizbeach, when you get to the top of the mizbeach and you want to turn left or right, mizrach is going to be on your right, and ma'ariv is going to be on your left. So when it says over here that you turn to mizrach, which is your right, is because when you come up from the kevesh of the mizbeach, it's to mizrach. So bereisha, so in the beginning, if you're turning right, so in the beginning, ba'ahu paga, which is the one that you're going to come to first? You're going to come to mizrachis tzvainis first. So Rashi explains what this means. That it really, two points. First of all, if you're going up on the ramp of the Mizbeach, the first corner that you're going to come to is actually going to be draimis mizrachis, because like I said, the kevesh is on darim. So you come up from the darim side, you're going to first come to draimis mizrachis. But as we just said before, you don't do the zrika of the dam by the oil on draimis mizrachis because there's no yisoid there. So when it says bereisha, the first one where there's a yisoid of the Mizbeach that you're going to be coming to is going to be mizrachis tzfainis. And then you come around and you go to Maravis Draimis. That's one point. Another point that Rashi makes over here is that the emes is that we're talking over here about the Oila. When it comes to the Oila, you're not even going up to the ramp and you're not coming and making that right turn to go to Mizrachis Tzvainis because the carbon Oila, the kain doesn't even go up the ramp to make the Zrika. The carbon Chatas, the Zrika has to be done above the red line on the Mizbeach, above the Chutas Sikra, so you go up the Kevesh to do the Zrika above. But by the carbon oila, he does the zrika when he stands on the ground below. He doesn't even have to b'chlal go up. So the emphasis, this whole thing of turning to the right, does not apply here if you're standing on the bottom. But Rashi says, since by the Karban Chatas you do have to go up the ramp, and then you're going to have to turn the right first to go to Mizrach side first. So once it was established, the order that the Zrikas Adam by Karban Chatas is done first on the Mizrach side, there were Keveya by all Karbanis that it's done first on the Mizrach side, and then you go to the Maidav side. Sagt the Gemara weiter. Now the Gemara has one final question over here on Abishal's opinion. So Abishal learned out from the pasuk that the Karban Tamid has to be partially like an Oila, a Maisa Oila, and partially like a Maisa Chatas. How do you know that to read this pasuk that it's telling you regarding the Oila, regarding the Karban Tamid, the Ka'amar Rachmana Ovid Ba Maisa Chatas, that you should do like a Karban Chatas. The Dilma, maybe read the pasuk in the reverse. The chatas that's brought then under the shchaydish, who the ka'amar rachmana ovid b'maisa oila, that Karban chatas should have in it partially like an oila. Maybe read the pasuk the opposite. So the Gemara says no, lo yisal kadaitoch. It doesn't make sense to read the pasuk this way because the chsiv, what does the pasuk say? Al oila satomid yeyasa v'niskay. On the oila satomid, you should add the chatas onto the tamid. My ka'amar rachmana. What is the Torah saying? Midi the chatas shadi a oila. Take one of the things of the chatas, which is the way the zrika was done, and put that on the oila. That by the oila, half is done like the oila, and half should be done like the chatas, but not the other way around. Okay, now the Gemara here brings up a Mishnah in Masechta Tamid, and it goes into a whole different inyan, and Rashi here points out that really this doesn't belong in Masechta Yoma. The only reason it brings it up over here in Masechta Yoma is because it's a similar thing to what the Gemara said before on Daf Yudalid. Before the Gemara was discussing a stira between the Mishnah in Yoma and a Mishnah in Tamid, and the Gemara there came to a conclusion that the answer, one of the answers to the stira was that the Mishnah in Yoma is going according to Rab Shimon Isha Mitzpeh, and Rab Shimon Isha Mitzpeh argued with the Stam Mishnayis in Tamid. So even though the Gemara had no raya to this, but because the Gemara finds that Rab Shimon Isha Mitzpeh argues with the Mishnah in Tamid in one case, so therefore it comes to the conclusion that the Mishnayis in Yoma is probably also Rab Shimon Isha Mitzpeh. So the Gemara now will bring a similar thing, that there will be a stira between a Mishnah in Tamid and a Mishnah in Midis, and we're going to give a similar kind of answer that if you see that there's a Tana that argues on one Mishnah in Tamid, so therefore it's Mistama another Tana. So it's only because the answer is a similar kind of answer that the Gemara brings up this subject here, but it's really a completely new, unrelated topic. Tanan Asam, so we learned in the Mishnah in Masechta Tamid regarding the Seder of the Aveda. Amar lehem amimune, the one that was in charge over there for the Kainim to do their Aveda, said, Tsu'u, in the morning when they had to bring the Karban Tamid, he said, go, vehaviu tleh milishkas beis hatloim. Bring a tleh from the chamber where the tloim, the lambs were kept over there. We learned this in Masechta Shkalim. There was a chamber where they always had 6 lambs kept there every day to be prepared to be brought for the Karban. Where was this chamber? So there was a place in the Beis HaMikdash that was called Beis HaMoiked. Beis HaMoiked was a very large room, and in this large room of the Beis HaMoiked, it's called Beis HaMoiked because Moiked means a fire. They made a fire in that room because the Kohanim had to do the Avodah in the Beis HaMikdash, and they had to walk barefoot on the cold floor, on the marble floor in the Beis HaMikdash. So they had this room which had a big fire in it in order for them to be able to go and warm up over there. But this Beis HaMoiked was a very large room, and it had 4 chambers on the 4 corners. And the Mishnah says, "V'haloi lishkas atloim," and it's this lishkas Beis Atloim. Where was it? Haisa b'miktzaya tzfeinis maravis. It was in the tzfeinis maravis corner of this Beis HaMoiked. V'arba lishkas hayisham. There were 4 different chambers in this Beis HaMoiked. Achas lishkas atloim, one as we just mentioned, the lishkas atloim and tzveinis maravis. V'achas lishkas achesamais. Another one was a room where they had all the chesamais, the tokens that they used for people that had to bring karbanis. So we learned also about this in Masechta Shkalim. People didn't actually bring their behemoths. They brought the money and they gave it to the kohen there, and then they got a token. And then they would bring this chesam to another kohen that gave them the right animal that they needed for their carbon. And then in this big Beis HaMoiked, there was a small Beis HaMoiked where they had the fire or all the materials that they needed for the fire of this Beis HaMoiked. And another lishka was where they made the lechem aponim there. This is the Mishnah in Masechta Tamid. Raminu, on this the Mishnah, the Gemara asks a contradiction from another Mishnah in Masechta Midas, where it speaks about the actual structure of the Beis HaMikdash. And there it says, Arba lishkas hayel Beis HaMikdash. There were 4 different chambers in this Beis HaMikdash. Keketainiyes hapsuchais letraklen, like small rooms that are open to a big hall. So it was a big Beis HaMikdash, was a big room with small chambers in the corners. Shtayim b'kodesh, and then the Mishnah there in Midas says that this Beis HaMikdash was built on the wall of the Azara. Half of the Beis HaMikdash was inside the Azara and half of it was outside. So Shtayim b'kodesh, 2 of these chambers were inside in the Kodesh, Shtayim b'chayil, and there were another 2 that were built on the outside. V'rashay pispesin mavdilim in kodesh l'chayil. And in the middle of the room, they placed these pieces of wood along the place where it was right, the border of kodesh and chayil, to know what's inside and what's outside. What were these 4 rooms inside this Beis HaMikdash? Maravis d'raimis, the room that wasn't Maravis d'raimis, he haisa lishkas tloi carbon. That was the room where they kept the lamps for the carbon. So right here is the contradiction. Because here it's saying that the Lishkas Atloim wasn't Maravis Draimis. Before it said that the Lishkas Atloim wasn't Sfainis Maravis. Okay, so that's the contradiction the Gemara here is asking. The Mishnah there continues, Draimis Mizrachis, He Lishka Shayaisim Balechem Aponim. That's the corner where they made the Lechem Aponim. Mizrachis Sfainis, there was a chamber in Mizrachis Sfainis, Bok Gonzu, Beis Chashminoi. So the Beis Chashminoi, over there they hid Avne Mizbeach, the stones of the Mizbeach, Sheshikzu Malchei Yovan, which the kings of Yovan, that made it despicable because they used it, they served the Zara on it, so they took it apart and they had to rebuild the Mizbeach. They put the stones over there in that room. Sfainis Maravis, the room that was in Sfainis Maravis, Ba Yerdin Lebeis HaTfilah. That was the room that they had a staircase that went down to a mikveh table over there. Taisus points out that another detail that the Gemara does not address over here, that before it had the Lishkas Beis HaMikdash and Mishkas HaChisamais, which is not mentioned in this Mishnah in Midas B'chlal. So Taisus says you have to say that some of these rooms had a dual purpose. But that the Gemara is not asking. What is the Gemara's question? The Gemara's question is regarding the Lishkas HaTloim. What's the location of the Lishkas HaTloim? Is it Maravis Draimis or is it Sfainis Maravis? So the Gemara answers, Amar Rav Huna, Man Tana Midais. Who is the Tana of Midais? Rabbi Lazar ben Yaakov he. Rabbi Lazar ben Yaakov, he's the Tana of Midais. And here in the continuation, the Gemara is going to bring another Mishnah in Midas, which is Rabbi Lazar ben Yaakov. So from that we know that the Tana of Midas B'chlal is Rabbi Lazar ben Yaakov, and therefore we say that Rabbi Lazar ben Yaakov is the Mishnah in Midas, and the Tana in Tamid argues with Rabbi Lazar ben Yaakov.